Okay, good evening. Oh, that was a nice voice. Bill and Marla decided that the only way they were going to pull off a Sunday afternoon quickie with their 10-year-old son in the apartment was to send him out onto the balcony and order him to report on all the neighbourhood activities. Roy began his commentary as his parents put their plan into operation. "There's a car being towed from the parking lot," he called. And then a couple of minutes later, "An ambulance just drove by." A few more minutes. "Looks like the Andersons have company," he called out. And then, "Matt's riding a new bike and it looks like the Coopers are having sex." Mum and Dad shot up in bed. "How do you know that?" the father asked. "Their kid's standing on the balcony too." Then one night a little girl walks in on their parents having sex. The mother is going up and down on the father, and when she sees the door to look at them, she immediately stops. "What are you doing, Mummy?" the little girl asks. Well, the mother's too embarrassed to tell her little girl about sex, so she has to make up an answer real quick. So she says, "Well, sweetie, sometimes Daddy's tummy gets so big, I have to jump up and down in it to flatten it out a bit." The girl shakes her head and laughs. "Well, Mummy, you really shouldn't bother with that." Mother's confused. "Why do you say that?" She said, the little girl replies, "Because, Mummy, every time you leave in the morning, the lady next door comes over and blows it back up." So I'm thinking about you men, and I'm thinking about your man bits, and I'm thinking that your dicks, they have a very sad life. I mean, for example, his hair's a mess, his family's nuts, neighbour's an asshole, his best friend's a pussy, and his owner beats him. So a man is in the hotel lobby. He wants to ask the clerk a question, but as he turns to the front desk, he accidentally bumps into a woman beside him, and as he does, his elbow goes into her breast. They are both startled, and he says, "Ma'am, if your heart is as soft as your breast, I know you'll forgive me." And she goes, "If your penis is as hard as your elbow, my room's 1221. So an elderly Italian man goes to his parish priest and asks if the priest would hear his confession. "Of course, my son," said the priest. "Well, Father, at the beginning of World War II, a beautiful woman knocked on my door.
Nope, lost voice.
So I hid her in my attic. And they never found her." "That's a wonderful thing, my son. There is nothing there that you need to confess," said the priest. "Well, it gets worse, Father. I was weak. I told her that she had to pay rent for the attic with her sexual favours," continues the old man. The priest looks a bit worried by now, and he says, "Well, it was a very difficult time, and you did take a large risk. You would have suffered terribly at the hands of the German if you were found hiding her. I know God in his wisdom and mercy will balance the good and the evil and judge you kindly." "Thanks, Father," said the little old man. "That's really a load off my mind. Could I just ask one more question?" "Of course, my son," says the priest. The little old man goes, "Do I need to tell her the war is over?" So Steve and his buddies are hanging out and planning an upcoming fishing trip. Unfortunately, he had to tell them that he couldn't go this time because his wife wouldn't let him. After a lot of teasing and name calling, Steve headed home feeling very frustrated. The following week, when Steve's buddies arrived at the lake to set up camp, they were shocked to see Steve. He was already sitting in the campground with a cold beer, swag rolled out, fishing rod in hand, campfire glowing. "How did you talk your missus into letting you go, Steve?" "I didn't have to," Steve replied. Yesterday, when I left work, I went home and slumped down in my chair with a beer to drown my sorrows because I couldn't go fishing. Then the old lady, she snuck up behind me and covered my eyes and said, "Surprise!" When I peeled her hands back, she was standing there in a beautiful see-through negligee. And she says, "Bedroom, tie me to the bed, do whatever you want." Here I am.
Do whatever you want.
Here I am.
A young man and his date were parked on a back road some distance from town. They were about to have sex when the girl stopped. She turns towards him and she says, "Oh, sorry, I really should have mentioned this earlier, but I'm actually a hooker and I charge $20 for sex." Well, the man's already a bit sort of wound up, and so he reluctantly pays her, and they did the thing. Afterwards, smoking a cigarette, the man just sat in the driver's seat, looking out of the window. "Why aren't we going anywhere?" asked the girl. He looks at her and says, "Well, I really should have mentioned this before, but I'm actually a taxi driver and the fare back to town is $25. So, three sisters decided to get married on the same day to save their parents the expense of separate weddings. And as a further step to reduce the price tag, the three sisters resolved to spend their honeymoon night at home. Later that night, the mother couldn't sleep, so she went to get a cup of tea. On her way by, she tiptoed past her elder daughter's bedroom and heard her screaming. The mother thought to herself, that's normal, especially on the wedding night. She snuck past her second oldest daughter's room and heard her laughing. That's normal too, she thought. Finally, she stopped by her youngest daughter's room and she didn't hear a peep. She thought nothing of it. So the next morning in the kitchen, after the husbands had gone out, the woman asked her eldest daughter about the night's noises. "Well, Mum," she said, "you always said if I heard, I should scream." "Absolutely right, sweetheart," the mother assured her, turning to the middle daughter. "Now, why were you laughing?" she said. "You always said if it tickled, I could laugh," she said. "True enough." "Now it's your turn," she said to her youngest daughter. "Why was it so quiet?" She said, "Mum, don't you remember? You always told me don't talk with your mouth full."
Oh! Yeah. That's great.
So a strange guy stuck his head into a barber shop and asked, "How long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looked around the shop full of customers and said, "About 2 hours." I left. A few days later, the guy came back, did exactly the same. "How long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looked around the shop and said, "Cool, it's going to be at least 3 hours, mate." So the guy left. A week later, the same thing happened. And this time the barber said an hour and a half. The barber turned to his friend and said, "Hey, Bob, do me a favour, follow him and see where he goes. Because he keeps asking how long he has to wait and he never comes back." A little while later, Bob returns to the shop laughing hysterically. The barber says, "So, where does he go?" Bob looked up, wiping tears from his eyes, and he says, "Your house." So, as a final parting shot, this is a little statement. Before sex, you help each other get naked. After sex, you only dress yourself. There's a moral to this little tale. In life, no one helps you once you're fucked.
Oh, that's great.
No.
Yay, give it up for Cassie, everyone. Hooray for Cassie.